So what do Jeff Bezos and Howard Schultz have in common? Well, in addition to being filthy rich, they are Washington billionaires that have recently relocated to Florida. And believe me, they are not alone. The Sunshine State is officially drawing in boatloads of Washingtonians. And I don't just mean a handful of snowbirds, mind you. I mean a full-scale U-Haul convoy, sell your house and put on your flip-flops and don't look back migration that has been reshaping Florida's population for years. And look, I understand the Florida pitch. There's no income tax, and there is sunshine and warm weather 300 days a year, and the state's capital gains tax is non-existent, and there is housing that used to be a fraction of what you'd pay in the Puget Sound. Hint, used to be. But here's what I also need you to hear before you start browsing Zillow in Tampa, and let's face it, you're already doing that. But Florida in 2026 is not the Florida of 5 years ago. The pandemic has changed everything. The insurance crisis changed it. The population surge changed it. And if you are making the decision to relocate there from the Pacific Northwest based on a headline that you read in 2021, then you, my friend, are working with an outdated map. So today, we are going to run this comparison the right way. We've got 4 rounds, real numbers, honest verdicts, taxes, housing, the retiree picture, and lifestyle. And also at the end, we've got 5 Florida towns that are worth putting on your radar if the beautiful Sunshine State is, in fact, your answer. So I am Washington real estate advisor Leah Courage, and I'm the agent who will tell you what all the other agents are too scared to say. And I've got my pink on for Florida, and I've got my pineapple earrings in. So guess what? We're gonna dive in. So as we always do, let's set the scene first. So Florida right now is in a fascinating and genuinely complicated moment. The pandemic wave that turned Tampa and Orlando and Jacksonville into boom towns has actually matured into something more complex. It's now an economy dealing with infrastructure strain and a homeowners insurance market that nearly collapsed and is only now just starting to stabilize, and a cost of living that has crept up significantly on the people who moved there expecting the state to be cheap. At the same time, Florida is still doing a lot of things right. It remains one of the most aggressively tax-friendly states in the entire country for high earners and for investors. The weather is a real factor. The lifestyle, if it fits you, is genuinely exceptional. And the population just keeps on coming, which does tell you something. But what makes this comparison interesting is that Washington and Florida are not similar on paper as you might think, and they're also not as different in practice as the headlines might suggest. So let's go round by round. So round 1 is the tax battle. So let's start here because this is where Florida makes its hands down loudest argument. And honestly, it's a strong one. Florida has no state income tax. Full stop. No asterisk, no fine print. And unlike Washington right now, Florida's state constitution effectively bars a state income tax from ever being enacted. And, that's up for debate in Washington, of course. And I believe it's completely unconstitutional, but that's another story. So, by the way, on Florida, that is not a political promise. That is a structural wall for you. So, when Florida says no income tax forever, it has the legal architecture to completely back it up in a way that Washington currently, apparently, does not. So speaking of Washington, you need to know what's happening here right now. So on March 30th, 2026, Governor Bob Ferguson signed Senate Bill 6346 into law. a unconstitutional 9.9% income tax on earnings over $1 million set to take effect January 1st, 2028. Now, this is being challenged in court, as it very well should be. And also there's a referendum in the works, and there's also a recall petition that was filed against the governor on April 1st for something that was completely different. So you could honestly say that the state is dealing with something of a serious turmoil situation here. So whether the law actually breathes air in 2028, mind you, is genuinely kind of uncertain, but it is signed. And if you're a high earner that is watching this, guess what? Florida just got a lot more interesting. So here's where Florida really separates itself though. It's capital gains. Washington has a 7% capital gains tax on high profit asset sales. Florida has 0. If you sell $2 million in stock, you pay the federal government, and then Florida takes nothing. That is the secret sauce that keeps the ultra wealthy moving into Palm Beach and Miami. And it is a legitimate, meaningful advantage for anyone sitting on a significant investment portfolio. Now, sales tax. So Florida's base rate is 6%, with local surcharges pushing most areas to 7% to upwards of 7.5%. Washington, on the other hand, runs 9% to 10% sales tax depending on your city. So Florida wins hands down on sales tax rate. And unlike Tennessee, which we covered in one of our last comparisons, Florida exempts basic groceries from sales tax entirely. So you're not paying tax on your weekly Publix run. And that absolutely matters for families. Now, property taxes. Florida's average effective rate is around 0.91%, which looks competitive, but here is the thing nobody tells you before you buy. Florida has something called the Save Our Homes cap. Once you homestead your property, your assessed value can only rise 3% per year maximum. Sounds great, and it is for people who have owned their home for a decade. However, as a new buyer moving in from Washington, you are going to be assessed at the full market value, while your neighborhood in the same house who bought 10 years ago is paying taxes on an assessed value that is sometimes half of yours. It's called the welcome tax, and it is very real, so you need to budget for this. So the Courage verdict for round one, well, Florida wins this round, and it's honestly not even particularly close either. If you're a high earner or an investor or anyone with significant assets to eventually liquidate, Florida's tax picture is genuinely exceptional. No income tax with constitutional protection, no capital gains tax, lower sales tax, grocery exemption, list goes on. Washington competes on the income tax front for most earners for now, but Florida has the far overall stronger architecture, especially for wealth building. So a quick note before we hit round two. If you are watching this and realizing that your move decision is actually a six-figure financial calculation, good. That means you're paying attention, because my team actually helps Washington families navigate exactly these decisions every single day. And whether you're moving to and selling here and moving to Florida or relocating to Washington from somewhere else, we will sit down and run the actual numbers for your specific situation. And if Florida is your answer, or if any other state is your answer and you're watching from New York or Arizona, we at the Courage Group have a preferred agent partner network, and we will connect you with someone exceptional on the ground wherever you're looking. The link to book a consultation with us is in the description, so click it and let's get in touch. Now, onward. Round two is housing. So this is where the Florida story gets complicated, because the headline, "Florida is cheaper than Washington," is absolutely no longer universally true. And in some markets, it's flat out wrong. Washington's statewide median home price is sitting around $600,000, with the Puget Sound corridor pushing way higher to $700,000 to $800,000 for a realistic single-family home in a desirable area. That is the number that people are fleeing when they're looking at Florida. Florida's statewide median list price is sitting around $425,000, which is absolutely lower. But that number is doing a lot of averaging across a very diverse state. Miami's median is hovering right near $625,000 right now. Orlando is around $460,000. Tampa has climbed significantly. So if you're planning to land in one of these major metros, which most people are, the gap between Washington and Florida is actually narrowing rather quickly. And in Miami, it has effectively closed. So where Florida genuinely delivers value is in its mid-sized markets and its sprawl. Because Florida has no statewide urban growth boundary, which means no land use restrictions limiting how far development can push, builders have just kept building. They've gone west into the Everglades and north into pasture land in every single direction practically. So you can get more house for your money in Florida, but that house might be a subdivision that was built 3 years ago, 45 minutes from anything, in a totally car-dependent corridor with infrastructure that is visibly struggling to keep up with the population that it's absorbing. And also, I want to name the hidden cost that almost nobody runs before they move to Florida. It's utilities. Cooling a home in Florida's heat and humidity is not a rounding error on your monthly budget. Average electric bills in the summer run from $200 to $350 a month. And that is even with the relief that they get this spring when Duke and Florida Power and Light, otherwise known as FPL, finally rolled off those old storm charges. So if you're coming from Western Washington where you barely run the AC, this is honestly going to feel a lot like a second car payment showing up on your statement every single August. So the Courage verdict for round 2, well, Florida wins on sticker price in most markets, but the gap is smaller than it used to be for sure, and the sprawl is real, and the commutes in major metros are absolutely brutal, and the utility costs are a genuine line item that 100% changes the math. So do not compare a Washington home price to a Florida home price without also running the full monthly cost picture: insurance, utilities, HOA fees, and property taxes at full assessed value. So round 3 is the retiree picture. All right, this is the round where Florida has historically made its strongest case, as you can imagine, and in 2026, it still absolutely does, but the math has become much more specific. So let's start with the income wins. Florida does not tax Social Security. It does not tax 401k or IRA distributions. It does not tax pension income. So for a retiree drawing from multiple buckets, Florida's tax treatment is essentially perfect. Now, Washington matches this for 99% of people. We don't tax retirement income either. But here is the 2026 asterisk. Under Washington's new Senate Bill 6346, if your total adjusted income, which includes those RMDs and pension payments, crosses that $1 million threshold per household, the state is now coming for a 9.9% cut. And remember, that million is for the entire household. There is no marriage bump here. So for high net worth retirees, Washington just became a hell of a lot more expensive. Florida, meanwhile, has a constitutional wall that prevents it from ever happening to begin with. So there's a capital gains win for Florida. It has zero state tax on capital gains. So if you're a retiree that's sitting on a massive portfolio and you plan to liquidate a chunk of it to fund your lifestyle, Florida takes absolutely nothing. In Washington, you're literally handing over 7% on those high profit sales. And that is a massive gap in the long-term wealth preservation strategy. But I have to give you the Courage reality check here on the cost of living in both places, because this is where the 2026 math actually surprises people. So let's talk about homeowners insurance. So for years, the story was that Florida insurance was an uninsurable nightmare. But as of 2026, in April, we're actually seeing a massive great reset. Thanks to the 2023 reforms, 17 new private insurers have entered Florida. And this spring, we are seeing the first rate decreases in a decade. So here is the 2026 insurance rule of thumb for Florida. If you buy an older coastal home, meaning pre-2000, Yes, you might still see a punishing $7,000 or $8,000 annual homeowners insurance premium. However, if you buy a new construction built to the 2026 hurricane codes, some premiums are actually dropping into the $3,000 to $4,000 range. In Washington, your insurance for that same home might be $1,500. So even with the Florida price drop, you are still paying a multi-$1,000 sunshine tax every single year just to protect your house. So healthcare in Florida actually remains a top-tier draw. The Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville is the #1 ranked facility in the state for 2026, and the density of specialists along the Gold Coast is actually world-class. So what's the caveat? Well, in high-growth hubs like the Villages, for example, the demand is so high that wait times for new patients are actually currently stretching into late 2026 in some cases. So the Courage verdict for round 3? Well, Florida is still the heavyweight champion for retirement taxes. There's no tax on any retirement income, no capital gains, and that Save Our Homes cap that limits your property tax growth to 3% a year once you're settled is fantastic. But a retiree moving from Washington in 2026 needs to be strategic. If you buy a 30-year-old home on the coast, your insurance bill might eat your tax savings alive. If you buy new construction and use Florida's Wealth Shield to protect your capital gains, the math is an absolute slam dunk. Round 4, lifestyle, weather, and vibe. All right, let's talk about the non-spreadsheet items for a minute. And I'm going to be honest with you here the same way I always am. So let's start with the weather. So Florida's weather is genuinely great for about 8 months of the year. From October through May, it is hard to argue with. It's warm and it's sunny and it has relatively low humidity. And it's also the kind of weather that makes people feel like they're permanently on vacation. I get it. After a Washington winter with the gray, the rain, and the big dark, as we call it, from November all the way through March, where the sun essentially ghosts you the whole time, Florida's winter feels kind of like a miracle. However, June through September, that is what Floridians call the steam. The humidity is so extreme during that period that your windows fog up on the outside of the house. It's not just hot. It is a physical experience of heat and moisture that most Pacific Northwesterners have genuinely never encountered, unless you've traveled to Florida or Southeast Asia. It's the only other place I've actually found it. So you're not going outside, by the way, for leisure in August in Orlando. You are moving from air-conditioned house to your air-conditioned car to your air-conditioned destination and back again. So if you love outdoor living like hiking and cycling and weekend adventures on foot, that version of your life pauses for about 4 months out of every single year in Florida. And then there are the hurricanes, which we don't deal with in Washington. I don't care how many atmospheric rivers we have, they're not hurricanes. And hurricanes, by the way, are not just a theoretical risk. They are a real infrastructure and financial consideration that completely shapes how you buy, how you build, and how you insure a home in Florida. But there is some significant context that you need to know regarding the roof law. So since 2022, Florida has actually had a law on the books that prevents insurers from refusing to renew your policy solely because of your roof's age, even if it's over 15 years old, as long as an authorized inspection proves that it has at least 5 years of life left. So this was designed to end the era where companies could force a $20,000 roof replacement just because of an arbitrary birthday on a calendar. However, in 2026, the market reality is still catching up to the law. So while the law helps manage the mandate to replace it, it doesn't always stop the premium hikes that come with an older roof. Living in hurricane territory means that your lifestyle is always tied to the weather. It just gets managed differently than the moss and the gray like we're used to in Washington. And now let's talk about my favorite topic aside from real estate, the outdoors, because this is the one category where I think Washington wins so decisively that it almost ends a conversation for a certain type of person dead in the water. So Washington is genuinely one of the most extraordinary outdoor states in the entire country. Within 2 hours of most of the population, you can be standing on an alpine glacier, kayaking in a saltwater channel, hiking through old growth forests, or watching the sun set over the San Juan Islands from a ferry deck. We have the Olympics, the Cascades, the Columbia River Gorge, Rainier, the Palouse, the North Cascades. It's not just one landscape. It is 6 landscapes stacked on top of each other. And our summers, when the gray lifts and the sky goes blue and the temperatures sit in the mid-70s, they are genuinely some of the best outdoor weather on the entire planet. I will fight someone on this. We have no humidity, we have no bugs, and we also have no excuses. You're outside and you are living in the summertime. Florida's outdoors are very real too, but they are a fundamentally totally different proposition from Washington. Florida is flat, almost entirely flat. There are no mountains, no elevation changes to speak of, no ski days, no summit hikes. What Florida has instead is water, and a lot of it. The Gulf Coast beaches are genuinely world-class, some of the most beautiful white sand coastlines in the entire country for that matter. The Florida Keys are extraordinary. The Everglades are unlike anything else on Earth. So if you're a warm water-centric person like a boater or a kayaker or a fisherman or a diver or a paddleboarder, Florida is going to be your paradise. The water access and the marine life are exceptional in a way that Washington, as beautiful as it is, simply cannot replicate. But here's the honest reality check. Florida's outdoor window is seasonal in the opposite direction from Washington's. When we lose the outdoors to gray and rain from November through March, Florida loses it to heat and humidity from June through September. And loses it is truly not an exaggeration. Hiking in Florida in July is not a pleasant experience. Trail running in August is borderline dangerous. The outdoor lifestyle that Florida sells you in its marketing is largely an October through May lifestyle. And if you're someone who needs to be outside every single weekend, regardless of the season, then you honestly need to factor in that 4-month wall of heat and humidity. The bottom line is this, friend. If your outdoor identity is built around the mountains and skiing and hiking and fishing and rivers and that very specific Northwest feeling of being small in a very large wilderness, Florida cannot give you that. It does not exist there. But if your outdoor identity is built around water, like fishing, boating, beaches, sunsets over the Gulf, Florida will give you more of that than you will ever know what to do with. Just know which camp you're in before you make this call. Because honestly, I've talked to too many people who moved to Florida for the weather, and then they spent the first summer genuinely grieving, missing the mountains. So culturally, Florida is what I call a transplant culture. And I mean that as a genuine observation and not a criticism, by the way. Almost everyone in Florida is from somewhere else. The social scene there is very warm and it's very friendly, speaking from experience. And it's quite easy to enter in a way that is almost the exact opposite of Washington's famous Seattle freeze. You will make friends faster in Florida. And if Floridians come to you, you will make friends with them here. One of my favorite people in the world is a Floridian, and I felt like I was best friends with her from the moment that I met her. The flip side is that communities can feel transient. People come and go in a way in Florida that makes it kind of hard to build the deep, kind of long, decade-long neighborhood roots that a lot of Pacific Northwesterners find themselves very attached to without even realizing it. Politically, Florida has moved significantly to the right over the last several years, and in 2026, it is a firmly red state at the statewide level. So if you're leaving Washington partly because of its political direction, Florida is going to feel like a completely different world. If you are moving purely for the financial picture and the politics are going to be just an adjustment, consider that before you pack your bags, and definitely look at where you're moving, because all of these areas, whether it's Miami or Orlando or anywhere else or any of the smaller towns, they're all going to be a little bit different from one another. So what's the Courage verdict for round 4? Florida's lifestyle absolutely delivers, but only if it fits you. If you are a warm water person, a beach person, a golf person, a year-round outdoor enthusiast who loves the heat, then Florida is genuinely exceptional. If you are a hiker, a skier, I need to see a mountain kind of person, or someone whose mental health depends on 4 distinct seasons and green, lush forests, then Florida is going to genuinely feel like something is missing that you honestly can't quite name. Just know which camp you're in before you choose to make a move. So, who wins? Well, Florida wins for high earners and investors who benefit from zero capital gains tax and also constitutional income tax protection. And it wins for retirees that are drawing from multiple income sources who want the strongest possible tax treatment of their nest egg. Also wins for lifestyle seekers who want warmth and water and a social scene that welcomes transplants almost immediately. And also for anyone whose financial picture includes significant assets to eventually liquidate. Washington, on the other hand, wins for tech and aerospace professionals who are firmly anchored to the Puget Sound job market. It wins for outdoor enthusiasts whose lifestyle just fully depends on the beautiful mountains and ferries and the Pacific Northwest scenery that we're blessed with here. And it also tends to win for moderate earners for whom Florida's insurance costs and their utility bills and the welcome tax just completely erode the financial advantage faster than the tax savings can actually offset it down there. Neither state is a perfect trade. Florida's insurance market is stabilizing, but it is definitely still punishing. Washington is navigating a legal fight over a new income tax that could completely reshape this comparison in coming years. Both states are in transition, so keep your eyes open. But if you're looking for good coffee, Washington wins always. So if Florida is your answer, here are 5 towns I would actually point you toward. And I left Miami and Orlando out of this list on purpose because you already know they exist. So number 5 is Ocala. So Ocala is the practical pick on this list. It's a fast-growing city in central Florida's horse country, about 90 minutes from both Tampa and Orlando, but without either city's price tag or traffic. So the median home prices are sitting right around $280,000 to $310,000 in early 2026, which is actually among the most accessible of any Florida market worth considering. It has year-round outdoor recreation and a genuine local economy, and there's also a pace of life there that feels nothing like the coastal metros. It's a super strong pick for remote workers also and retirees who want Florida's tax environment but without Florida's crowd. Number 4 is beautiful St. Augustine, which is the oldest city in America, and it's one of the most underrated on the entire East Coast. So St. Augustine sits on Florida's northeast coast with genuine historic architecture. It also has a walkable downtown and beach access, but without Miami's price or Miami's attitude. So the median home prices here are around $380,000 to $420,000 as of early 2026. And it also draws a mix of retirees and remote workers and history-minded buyers who want beauty and character in a place that has been inhabited for over 450 years. Incredible. For a Washingtonian who values, for example, established communities and a genuine sense of place, St. Augustine is the one that will definitely surprise you on this list. So number 3 is Sarasota. So if you want Florida's best version of arts, culture, and coastal beauty, but without Miami's intensity, Sarasota is your answer. It has a world-class art scene. It has the Ringling Museum, a top-ranked opera, and also a performing arts calendar that punches way above its weight. And also it has some of the most beautiful beaches in the entire state. Median home prices here are around $480,000 to $520,000, which definitely puts it on the higher end of this list. But the quality of life here is exceptional. The healthcare infrastructure is super strong, and it also kind of draws on a sophisticated buyer, if you will, who wants more than just sunshine. So for the right retiree or remote worker who wants to spend a little more, Sarasota consistently delivers. So number 2 is Pensacola. So Pensacola is the dark horse on this list, and it deserves more attention than it gets. Sitting on Florida's panhandle on the Gulf Coast, Pensacola actually has some of the most stunning white sand beaches in the entire country. Reminds me of the movie Contact. It's a great movie with Jodie Foster, if you haven't seen it, by the way. And it also has a military presence from NAS Pensacola that gives it definitely a grounded, community-rooted character that a lot of Florida boom towns tend to lack. Median home prices here are around $320,000 to $360,000. The cost of living is genuinely lower than a lot of Florida markets, and the pace is slower, and it also has a kind of Pacific Northwest sensibility in the best possible way. People who move there tend to stay. So for a Washingtonian who wants Florida's tax environment, but without feeling like they've just landed in a theme park in one of the major cities, Pensacola is definitely a spot to look. So number one is Tallahassee. So for a Washingtonian specifically, so for somebody used to a city with amenities and government infrastructure and a genuine intellectual community and trees, mind you, Tallahassee is the softest landing on this entire list. It is Florida's capital city. It's home to Florida State University and Florida A&M. And it has a canopy road system of centuries-old live oaks that makes it feel a lot more like the Pacific Northwest than pretty much any other Florida city that I can point you toward. Median home prices here are sitting around $290,000 to $320,000 as of early 2026. And the political environment is what you'd expect from a state capital with two major universities. I'll let you piece that together. And also, the cost of living is genuinely accessible here. So if you want Florida's tax picture, but without Florida's coastal chaos, Tallahassee is definitely where you're going to want to start. So that, my friends, is Washington versus Florida in 2026. And now you have a real framework to make this decision based on your actual numbers and your actual life, and not just a dream about escaping the rain, which I can't blame you for. We all have it, especially in February. But here is what I will leave you with. Both of these states are actively in transition. Washington is fighting a legal battle over its new Millionaires tax that absolutely could and really is right now reshaping the entire income tax conversation entirely. Florida is rebuilding its insurance market after years of crisis and absorbing a population wave that is still changing the housing market in that state in real time. And we are going to keep our thumbs on the pulse of these changes, literally just right like that. And if you want to be the person who knows before everyone else does, then go ahead and subscribe right now to our channel and turn on notifications. That is genuinely why this lovely community of ours on this channel exists. And if you're weighing a move, whether you're selling here, buying in Florida, or you're just trying to figure out which direction makes sense for you and your family, my team and I are here for that conversation. All of our contact information is below. I am Leah Courage. Thank you so much for watching. Keep exploring, and I will see you in the next one.